Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast, everyone. I am Jon Scott, flying solo here. Kevin Carroll out of town, but so much to talk about here because free agency was unofficially underway at the beginning of the week for the tampering period. That's where you saw a lot of things moving and shaking. Now things officially underway as of Wednesday at 4 p.m. And from a Bills perspective, I would say nothing too surprising. Last week we dealt with so much of them trying to make moves to get under the salary cap, which they did and continue to do in the beginning portion of this week. And now, more about retention than addition for Brandon Beane. And I think a lot of that has to do with the financial aspect of things, and it's not too surprising. He made it perfectly clear at the end of the regular season and postseason, when looking ahead and forecasting to his offseason blueprint, they just don't have the money to make any sort of splash moves for the second offseason in a row. It was the Von Miller move a few years ago, and then as Josh Allen's new contract has kicked in and other guys have gotten paid, it's more about the core that they have and are keeping rather than bringing in new guys. And I got to be honest with you, I agree with the idea that you don't really build a team through free agency. It's the best place, I think, to instantaneously plug holes. You're always going to overpay, almost always. You look at some of these deals that guys that are incredibly talented players, they're even, by and large, getting overpaid. You could probably name on one, maybe two hands across the entire National Football League guys whose salary matches or is even under after their rookie deal, where their production and stature in the game truly is. Josh Allen would be one of those. Before we really get rolling here, I would like to remind you, as always, make sure you subscribe, like, and even give me some comments here on the Buffalo End Zone podcast YouTube page as we continue to churn out content as the offseason moves along, including, I'll just give it to you straight, I did some X polls last week regarding our bracket of the best player the Bills have traded for. Yeah, we kind of had to tweak the criteria for that, and to no surprise, Josh Allen winning that one rather easily. It was interesting to see Stephon Diggs take out LaShawn McCoy rather easily there. That was a matchup I thought that would be interesting. Cornelius Bennett in the Final Four against Allen. Upcoming next week, which I'm going to be on vacation, finally. I haven't gone on a trip with my wife in a year, so we're going back to Jamaica for a third time. Kevin, going to hold down the fort, certainly continue to talk about free agency, but him and I have already compiled a bracket for the Bills' best ever free agent additions. And this one, to me, unlike the best player they've ever traded for, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it unfolds, because as I was compiling the list, there's a lot of guys that have come to this team. Terrell Owens, Mario Williams. We're even going to throw the James Lofton, Ken Hall, Steve Tasker, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Fred Jackson, and many more. We're going to a bracket 16 people deep there. So I think it's going to be a fun exercise as March Madness gets underway to bring the bracket style of things to the Buffalo End Zone podcast. For those of you who listen audio only on the podcast platforms, same thing goes. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and all that jazz wherever you may be consuming this one. Let's kick off with the theme so far of Bills free agency, and as I said off the top, that's retention. Daquan Jones, pretty universally from those on the beat, including myself when I had Matt Perino and Joe Biscaglia and Sal Capaccio on the show as well, it was pretty universally felt. The number one in-house guy that the Bills should prioritize to retain was Daquan Jones, and they were able to do so. The deal is reasonable. We understand the impact. Much like with a lot of guys, you sometimes, especially in the non-sexy positions like defensive tackle, you almost earn a greater respect and learn a greater appreciation for the value of someone, more so when they're not there than when they are. We saw Daquan Jones the first month of this past season. He was arguably playing the best football of his career. He would even tell you that, then suffers the pec injury in London. Incredible that he came back, and it was helpful for them, but he certainly was not the same player that he was at the beginning of the season. I think him, paired with Ed Oliver in the middle of that defensive line, is a great combination. Still work, though, left to be done on the interior. I would say when we discuss not only the remaining elements of free agency, but even going into the draft. I put the interior of the defensive line, defensive tackle, because they like to go 4 deep there. They really have to with Ilianku in there as well. AJ Epinesa, I don't know if I would say this as a surprise. He was probably the most reasonable to assume was possible to bring back on the defensive line because of his price. Leonard Floyd gets paid out in San Francisco. Good for him. He was open. He was going for the bag. Bills certainly probably were not able to go in that stratosphere $10+ million a year. They get Epinesa about $7 a year for a few more, and I like it. Listen, I've done stories with AJ. I've talked to him about it beyond just those sit-downs. The first few years of Epinesa, kind of a wash. I mean, it's been talked about a lot, but just as a reminder, he was a 280-plus pound power rusher at Iowa. The Bills bring him in and say, no, we don't want you to be a power rusher. We want you to be a more speed-type guy off the edge. He dropped 30-plus pounds his rookie season, and just trying to manage the body weight, while anytime you lose weight, it's not easy to lose, especially that much weight, and not lose strength. So he's trying to completely retool his body, and then in turn, once he gets the body under wraps and under control, then he has to become a completely different pass rusher. He's not bowling guys anymore and just brute strength pushing them around. He has to learn bend. He has to learn technique, something that Leonard Floyd himself really helped Epinesa with this past season. So while 4 years in totality for a second-round pick, yeah, it has not been a great return on investment with AJ Epinesa. But I kind of break it into 2 and 2, kind of push the first 2 away, and look at what he's been able to build 2 years ago and this past season, fighting through injuries, coming back and being pretty productive there. Do I think that he should be the Bills' second guy opposite of Greg Rousseau in the starting rotation? Is that ideal if you want to have a premium pass rush? No, I don't think so. I still think there's work to be done there, and I think it'd be unreasonable to think Von Miller is going to reascend into that position, but that's certainly what Von Miller, based upon what we've seen reported about the restructuring and reworking, I should say, of Miller's deal, very incentive-based. If he can reach those incentives, then he is ascending back into that guy that's the 1A, 1B to Greg Rousseau. I think Epinesa is a great rotational, maybe third guy in as of right now. I don't know if that's it. We'll get to this conversation of what do the Bills still need to do. I'm still pointing to defensive end, and it's kind of a fun conversation and a question that I posed to Kevin earlier in the offseason, and one that I threw back out on the social media platforms to you that we will get to later on in the show as we're going through. Cam Lewis, it seems him, after Taylor Rapp signed late last week, that's your safety combo right now. And Joe Biscaglia's bold prediction when I had him on for the roundtable was that the Bills would bring back Cam Lewis and that he was going to be seriously considered and maybe the top choice to be a starting safety for the Buffalo Bills. And as of right now, with Taylor Rapp and Cam Lewis back there, I think that's where they're going. I think Sean McDermott, and we've seen the Bills operate this way under the McDermott Bean era. I think McDermott, and his track record shows that it's a good bet to make, feels really confident in his ability to coach up secondary players. I think it's not that you could simply throw anyone back there and the results are going to be great, and we'll just throw it out there. As great of a coach as Sean McDermott is, in 2024, you are not going to see the same play in the back end that you have since 2017 between Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. They're all pros. They're some of the greatest players this organization has seen in decades, and you could even make a case. You talk about free agent additions. They are definitely in the bracket for 2 of the greatest free agent additions in franchise history. It's going to be a bit of a transition, but I think by bringing back Lewis and Taylor Rapp, I think that's a sign of confidence that Rapp, a full year into the system, now they feel maybe he's ready to assume a larger responsibility. And Lewis has been in the system for years and years and years, started at corner. Maybe feels he's best at nickel, but is agreed to take on the challenge of safety the past couple years. And as I did in a story this past season with Cam, you got to look past the Justin Jefferson catch. That is not the only moment you should remember of Cam Lewis. Should he have knocked the ball down? 100%. Will he tell you that? He did immediately afterwards in the locker room and has to this day. It was just one bad play and an incredible catch by an incredible football player. But do not let that cover your eyes to the fact that Cam Lewis is a solid football player. And Sean McDermott told me that this past season, and other guys in that room like Poyer, like Hyde, like others who have been around Cam Lewis during his tenure that he's battled just to make the team. I think you could maybe like more, and I think maybe they'll address it in the draft, but I think it's not a doomsday scenario of Cam Lewis and Taylor Rapp are the Buffalo Bills starting safeties with Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford at corner and Taron Johnson at the nickel. I don't think that's a bad secondary, and one that you need to be fearful week in and week out is just going to get picked on and picked apart throughout the 2024 season. A late addition and retention, I should say, coming here on Thursday, Ty Johnson. And I know Kevin and I in this show at the end of the season impressed. Ty Johnson comes in, you don't really think much of it, and he was impactful. He worked his way up, got an opportunity, and was good enough to stay. Would I be comfortable with him being the second back to James Cook this season? Darrington Evans is back here. Sure, I guess, but I think maybe that's, again, another position that while the running back market has been fascinating to watch around the entire league, there's still some pretty notable names out there, one of which, Dante Foreman, is someone that I brought up on the show within the past month that I'm a fan of. I think he'd be a great second option. But then if Ty Johnson, especially as a special teams type guy, if he's your third, I'd be good with that. I think there's still work to do at running back, but I do like bringing back Ty Johnson. Then, of course, last week, David Edwards, Quentin Morris. I don't know if we spoke on, I think that deal happened after we recorded the podcast last week. Another guy that comes in as an undrafted, has been in the system for a few years, has showed flashes. I know I said on this show multiple times throughout last training camp, he might have been the best tight end. Between Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and Quentin Morris, Morris flashed more than all of them. I'm not saying he's better than them, and certainly he's not going to play. But if you're going to keep three tight ends, he's cheap. He's been developed. I think he's still a player that can continue to get better. I think it's a great third option in the tight end room. So that kind of wraps up the retention. There's 4 guys this week, and then you take in David Edwards, Rapp, and Morris. 7 guys that the Bills have brought back, and that is a larger number than the 4 guys that the Bills have brought in off the free agent market. One is Mitch Trubisky, which is someone that a week ago, I think we touched on it. He's an upgrade from Kyle Allen. Sure, he's been in the system before. He understands now, I think, that he's a backup quarterback, which I think for players that were first-round picks, high first-round picks, certainly like Trubisky, and it didn't work out, maybe it takes some time to accept that. And he accepted it in Buffalo for 1 year, then had the opportunity to start in Pittsburgh. And the past 2 years, I think maybe, we know their quarterback situation, he really wasn't able to start in that situation. Now it's accepting at this point in his career he's a backup quarterback, 2-year deal. I mentioned when we did our quarterback state of the position at the beginning of the offseason, I just want stability there. I think that's important. And if Trubisky can be a guy that accepts the backup role, continues to be an affordable backup, and you just have him there in the room, I think that's a good fit here. Matt Hawk, interesting. Looks like we're going to have a punt-a-palooza once again at training camp, as Sam Martin had his ups and downs for sure. Matt Hawk had his ups and downs. That's kind of why they ultimately drafted Matt Araiza, and then we know that situation didn't work, and then Sam Martin came in and all that jazz. So we're going to have a punter competition. Shout out to Joe B. It's like his favorite thing of training camp. He's got to be happy. Now the real additions here. Mac Hollins, a wide receiver. This does not satisfy the need for wide receiver additions. This is simply a depth add with special teams because certain guys, Saran Neal, no longer on the team. We understand his main role was as a special teamer they need to satisfy some of these holes. And I think Mac Hollins is going to be someone, maybe think Trent Sherfield is a guy that ultimately didn't have much of a role when everyone was healthy on the offensive side of things, is capable, but no. This is the train for wide receiver early in the draft is still running hard. We're going to continue to have conversations later in this show about maybe more free agent additions of substance at the wide receiver position. Solid guy, special teams. That's where we're really going to do it. Not really moving the meter of impactful in terms of the Bills' offense. And then on the defensive side, probably another special teams depth add, Nicholas Morrow. With the Eagles last year, spent some time with the Chicago Bears prior to that. I mean, look at the Bills at linebacker. Matt Milano coming off an injury. We know Terrell Bernard, he's the starting middle linebacker. Boom, you're set. Dorian Williams entering his second year. He's probably going to be the swing guy. He's going to be the guy that, all right, kind of what Tyrell Dodson had been for the previous years of you're going to go, and if Milano's down or Milano's not ready to start the season, we'll go Bernard and Williams. If Bernard goes down, we'll slide Dorian Williams in at the mic. That's what Dorian Williams' role, I think, is going to be, and maybe he assumes some of the extra special teams roles that Tyler Medikevich still hasn't been brought back. I don't know if he will. And then Dotson was pretty impactful on offense, or I should say special teams as well. Balin Spector still around. So I would put Williams and Spector in terms of the depth chart of seeing the field defensively ahead of Morrow. So again, the Bills have made 4 adds, bringing back 2 guys that have previously been on the team. So only 2 outside additions really in the early onset here of free agency. Low money deals. I don't think you should be too surprised, too disappointed. I think the Bills have made it perfectly clear. They have to get cheaper and younger at a lot of spots, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that's going to be the theme here. They have a lot of draft picks. Didn't get the 3rd-round compensatory pick. Weird, they changed the rules that they thought they would for Tremaine Edmonds, but they get a 4th. Would you prefer a 3rd? Sure. But I don't think Brandon Beane's making 11 draft picks come the end of April. So 4th, 3rd, whatever it may be, ammunition, I think, to move around a little bit. The players that have gone, and we discussed, obviously, their release, their meaning to the team, the impact of the release a week ago. But it's interesting, some of the new destinations for some of these guys. Jordan Poyer, Miami Dolphins. We're going to see him twice a year now. Is Jordan Poyer the same player he was 2-3 years ago when he was an All-Pro? No, he'll admit that too. He understands he's on the back end of his career. Do I think he can still be impactful? Absolutely. And he's a Fort Lauderdale guy, close to Miami, so kind of able with his family to stay put throughout the football season rather than be in 2 different faraway cities. Saran Neal also signing with the Miami Dolphins. Mitch Morse, Gabe Davis, both going to Jacksonville, with Davis reuniting with Chad Hall, the former Bills wide receiver coach. And Doug Peterson was, I believe, with Morse in Kansas City early on in his career. So kind of a reunion for both of them. Nyheim Hines lands with the Cleveland Browns, probably mostly in the return capacity. Obviously, understand he's coming off a major knee injury, as is Nick Chubb there. Not that Hines would ever push Nick Chubb, but expect him to probably satisfy a role that many had thought and hoped he would with the Buffalo Bills. Leonard Floyd, as I mentioned earlier, gets his bag with the San Francisco 49ers. Doesn't look like they're bringing back Chase Young. They're making some moves on that defensive front as well. So Nick Bosa, Leonard Floyd, kind of now the tandem with the 49ers. Dane Jackson, I put it on X when I saw the numbers. He's getting a pretty solid payday in Carolina, and good for him. He's a guy that, whenever called upon as a 7th-round pick, was solid. And there's a ceiling with Dane Jackson, but I don't think it was, oh my gosh, we're in trouble if the Bills ever have to play Dane Jackson. Good for him to make the most of his opportunities with the Bills, have that be recognized elsewhere around the league, and get some money and an opportunity to probably start with Carolina Panthers. Deontay Hardy, as of almost 1 o'clock here on Thursday, I haven't seen him with a new team yet. Tre'Davious White, Bills put out a nice little video because he's a June 1st cut designation will be interesting to see not only where he lands, but the timeline. Obviously, June 1st is when he can officially sign and join the team. But where is he in his rehab? Where is a place that he's most comfortable? Is he looking for a place that he can start? Is he willing to take a back seat maybe this first year and work his way back from the Achilles injury? Will be really interesting because we understand, and you started to see a little bit like in the Washington game, it takes some time, but I still think the top level, maybe not all pro, but the top level Tre'Davious White is still in there. I still think he has it in him. He's an incredible worker and will bust it to try to get as close to the player he was before. It just financially was not feasible for him to do that at this point in time with the Buffalo Bills. But I do know and would guess, I know everyone in the organization's rooting for him, and I know how beloved he is, as we touched on the previous show, with most of Bills Mafia. So I think he's going to have quite a large and loud fan base, even from an opposing team, wherever he may land. Some of the moves the Bills made that got them some of the money that they could use to do the re-signings and do some of these additions. Josh Allen restructure, we knew that was coming. The one interesting little nugget, though, is it wasn't a full restructure. So we know Brandon Beane doesn't love kicking money down the line. Allen's not going anywhere, so it's not as big of a deal with him, but they didn't fully dip into the bucket for all the savings that they could get. But Allen, once again, a restructure. Dawson Knox reworked his deal. Exactly what reworked means, I don't know. But he was at a $14 million cap hit, and I think we all understood it wasn't financially feasible or realistic to get rid of him. But I don't think they wanted to restructure to make it harder for them to get out of his deal in the next year or so, because I just don't think, especially for a team that's up against the numbers here, you can be paying a second tight end, let's be real, $10+ million when you have the first-round pick in Dalton Kincaid. I'm not going to rehash why that was the driving force for my issues of Kincaid and the selection when it was a year ago, but it's the reality of where the Bills are. And so a reworked deal with Dawson Knox to lower his cap number. And then, interesting, and Deion Dawkins, being Deion Dawkins, love him, but he was playing with us for a little bit there on social media, acting like, hey, I'm going to get cut or I'm leaving. And then he signs a 3-year extension, keeping here through 2027. Top 5, I believe, paid tackle in the National Football League. Is coming off the best season of his career, and it just seems like the perfect union between the Buffalo Bills, the city, and the player. I mean, he loves it. He's open about his love for it. Everybody loves him. He's such a character, such a great guy. 2 times now Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for the Bills. So his giving and his philanthropy amongst this community is phenomenal. And he's going to be around for a few more years here, which really wasn't in doubt. But I think this, again, is a great manipulation of not kicking money down the road, but finding money in the present with a move that you were going to do anyways. And again, we understand you sign Deion now, maybe he's a top 5 paid tackle. A year from now, he could very easily be 10 to 15. That's just the way free agency and these markets go. It could very well be a great deal for Dawkins 12 months from now, and I think it's a good deal as things stand right now. So that was kind of the landscape of what the Bills did. Overall, around the National Football League, a lot of movement with the running backs. Saquon Barkley to the Eagles, Derrick Henry to the Ravens. The numbers aren't popping off the page, just a lot of movement. 8 million, I think. Outside of Saquon, it was basically 8 to 10 and less for these guys. And as I said, there's still running backs out there that I think are worth maybe considering. Dante Foreman is a guy that I like. Let's see who else is out there. Alexander Madison had some moments in Minnesota, and I'm saying like you're spending $2 million max on a running back, 1 year deal. Ezekiel Elliott's only 28 years old. He had moments in New England. Again, we're talking secondary guy that I think maybe would be good to have a veteran in that capacity, like Latavius Murray was, even like Damian Harris was before he got hurt. Damian Harris is still out there. There's some other guys that are interesting of sorts. I mean, J.K. Dobbins coming off major injuries his entire career. I don't think I'd really go that route. Kareem Hunt, I didn't see it with him in Cleveland. Rashad Penny was inactive amongst those backfield mates in Philadelphia for most of last season. And A.J. Dillon probably going to get paid at some point. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that doesn't really fit what I'm looking for either. So just some interesting names, though, that I think as you wait, maybe they can get there. So what do the Bills still need to do, in my opinion, here? I think adding another running back, as I just said. I think an edge rusher, I think, is interesting. I think the defensive tackle spot, and that's kind of it in terms of impactful. I think they're going to look to the draft to maybe look for a more long-term, high-ceiling addition for the safety spot. Like I said, Rapp and Lewis are fine, but I think you maybe try to find someone that can fill that role cheap, young, and have a higher upside than what you could probably get from Rapp and Lewis, and they can hold down the fort. I think offensive line draft, interior guys, I think that's going to be something to where maybe it's not super, super high, but I'd be fine day two. And frankly, if the value's right at the end of the first, I know we're on the wide receiver train, but if the value's right late first and there's just a guard-center combo, and you maybe alter this plan of bring the rookie in to compete. They beat out David Edwards, and he's their guard, or you have a center, and McGovern can kick back out to guard. I'm good with that. So that's kind of where I'm at. Wide receiver still at the top of the list. But I posed this question to Kevin, and it was almost revisionist from a year ago, and it's kind of brought us back to now. If the Bills somehow find some money, let's say $10 million, which I don't know if they have right now. This is just a hypothetical. If they find $10 million and they got one bullet in the chamber to say, all right, we're actually going to make not a Mac Hollins, not a Nicholas Morrow type of a addition. We're going to make a notable addition here, like what Leonard Floyd was a year ago. And there was so much talk around OBJ, who priced out. But then DeAndre Hopkins was sitting there, and it was a year ago, Hopkins, and then they end up spending the $7-10+ million on Leonard Floyd. And as the season moved along, I know they probably, definitely, needed another wide receiver last season. But I thought Leonard Floyd's impact, particularly the first 2/3 of the season, was fantastic. I mean, that defensive line, the pass rush, was maybe the most consistent position group of the entire team most of the season. Then they fell flat when it mattered most in the playoff loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now we fast forward to now. Obviously, the glaring need is for a wide receiver. But I still think, as I mentioned, I don't think A.J. Epinesa should be the counter with Greg Rousseau, and then Von Miller is your second line guy. I still think you need that. I don't even think Greg Rousseau is that top guy. So I ask, if they got $10 million in the chamber, would you rather that be spent on a free agent wide receiver or free agent edge rusher? Put the poll out there, and ultimately what happened with these results, as I pull it up here, is over 500 votes, 56.1% want the receiver, 43.9% say the edge rusher. And here is kind of where it lands for people. They feel it's best to get a cheaper, younger, and maybe a more dynamic wide receiver in the draft and backfill this edge rusher hole, for lack of a better term, through free agency. Now, people still want receiver. I think they just want to flood the position group. But there has to be a spot here. Let's say the Bills, still, obviously, they have Stephon Diggs. Let's say they go first or second round wide receiver, and then you have Khalil Shakir. Let's say they sign $10 million. Well, what's that going to mean for the rookie? What's that going to mean for Shakir? Not even short term, but even long term. That would be the only issue with the going after the wide receiver. To me, edge rusher, like I said, yeah, you bring back Epinesa, Rousseau's going to stick around, but that's a rotational thing. That's 4 or 5 guys deep that they're going to continue to rotate in and out in hopes of fresh bodies to get after the quarterback. Here's some of the names. Mike Williams of the Chargers was released. We've heard so much this offseason surrounding the wide receiver conversation. Yards after the catch, explosiveness, playmaking, twitchy, those types of traits. It's not Mike Williams. Physical. That dude's physical. Maybe not completely, not to a fault, but he's had injury concerns, and he's coming off of a big one from last season as well. I don't know what his price point is because of all of that as he approaches 30. He was, I believe, in the same draft class as Shaq Lawson, which was 2016. What do they do? Or maybe that was 2015. I can't remember. Sorry. I think it's 16. So what would that cost? Hollywood Brown, another guy that's still available. Is he, as the market is suppressed? Gabe Davis gets 13. I would think 13 a year. I would think Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, Odell Beckham. Like, are those guys going to get less than Gabe Davis? I don't know. Are we back to another OBJ conversation? He had moments in Baltimore, but he wasn't nearly as impactful as the DeAndre Hopkins addition was for the Tennessee Titans. Those are kind of the names in the top tier for wide receivers that maybe it's a stretch to think you're paying $10 million. Maybe. And I think Kevin maybe brought the name up. Someone on X responded to me this week with it. KJ Osborne, fun story. UB guy comes home. He's speed. He's been a solid 3 for the Minnesota Vikings. Not going to cost $10 million. Maybe that would be more of the range if the Bills are looking to continue to flush in wide receivers through free agency. But keep in mind, they don't know what they have in Justin Shorter. They signed KJ Hamler to the futures deal, and he was openly mentioned by Brandon Beane, unprompted, about in terms of speed and an addition and playmaking like that. So on the flip side, the edge rushers, Eric Armstead, released by the 49ers. He's someone that has been linked to the Bills. I saw a report from, I think it was the Athletic San Francisco 49ers reporter saying, don't be surprised. And that's interesting to me. He was due to make $28.3 million was his cap hit last year. Base salary with the signing bonus, it was over $20 million. So, I mean, he was set to make that much money. He's 30 years old. You're not paying him that much. Can they find the money to do that? Interesting. I don't think he's necessarily, though, the same oh shoot type of guy. I wouldn't mind them, though, making another addition should they do it. Other names out there. Emmanuel Ogbah, 30. He's had moments, but no, not really. Carl Lawson has had moments with the Jets. Yannick Ngakoue, that guy was a hot name years ago, really kind of fell off. Chase Young, what is he? We all thought it'd be Monster City, the Buckeyes back together with him and Bosa out in San Francisco. It really didn't work that way. He's only 24 years old. Injuries have been an issue for him. Is that someone you could get on a flyer? That kind of seems, if the Bills do their due diligence and still believe in it, if you can get him for the right price, prove it type deal, maybe that's something that could fall into that sort of range. So which one would you like? Again, you can drop the comments here on YouTube. You could send me your thoughts on social media on X at Jon Scott TV. Wide receiver versus defensive end, edge rusher. If the Bills have any room to make any impactful type addition as free agency continues to move along, would that be a preference for you to focus in on those two positions? And which one would those be? Khalil Mack is a guy that, if he's been out there floated, the Chargers currently right now are complacent with the cap, but they don't really have any room to maneuver. Keenan Allen, Khalil Mack, and even Joey Bosa have been names floated out there for other potential cut candidates. Mack coming off a resurgent season where he was absolutely phenomenal, but he's older. I mean, he was drafted 10 years ago. Amazing. That guy came out of UB 10 years ago, future Hall of Famer. Could kind of be righting or wrong. I think a lot of people wish they would have drafted Khalil Mack instead of Sammy Watkins 10 years ago. So free agency still fluid. I'm sure you'll be listening to this maybe even later tonight on Thursday, certainly in the Friday through the weekend into next week, and maybe some of the things and names that I've brought up, they've signed with other people. The Bills have made other plans. We'll see. Hoping to hear from Brandon Beane maybe in the next week, get his thoughts on the tough decisions to get rid of certain guys, the decisions to retain certain guys, and how he feels he's navigated and maybe still could navigate free agency, as well as we start turning our focus as the calendar creeps through March and into April. It's all about the NFL draft. Like I said, I'm out next week. I'll be on a beach in Montego Bay, Jamaica, working on my tan and hopefully rooting for my Dayton Flyers to advance in the NCAA tournament. Kevin will be back. We'll see if he flies solo, brings in a friend. We'll see what he wants to do, but he'll have reaction and more news and analysis and his thoughts on whatever moves are made from now to then. And then, as I said, teasing it up, the best free agent addition in Bills history bracket coming your way next week. Enjoy it. Thank you for listening. This has been the Buffalo End Zone Podcast. I'm Jon Scott.